Human cut the alien girl free before the ice crushed her, and her sister swore a blood oath to him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jacob Taylor was no stranger to danger, having spent years working as a rescue engineer on the harshest of planets. But this one was different. The wind was merciless, whipping snow in every direction, reducing visibility to almost zero. The temperature hovered dangerously close to -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and even with his specially designed thermal suit, he could feel the cold biting at his skin. He had come to this alien planet on a standard mission to assist in an outpost relocation, but a freak snowstorm had altered his plans. As he trudged through the thick snowdrifts, his breath coming out in short, sharp puffs, he noticed something in the distance, a figure, half buried under a heavy layer of snow and ice. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as he drew closer, his heart sank. It was a girl. An alien girl. Her skin was a beautiful shade of turquoise, her long silver hair half covered by the snow. She was unconscious, her body pinned under a thick layer of ice, and she was barely breathing. His first instinct was to run and get help, but the nearest station was miles away, and the storm was worsening by the minute. There was no time. The girl's life hung in the balance, and Jacob knew he was the only one who could save her. With determination, he pulled out his plasma cutter, his hands shaking with the cold as he worked furiously to free her. He sliced through the ice, the sound of the plasma blade cutting through the frozen surface echoing in the blizzard. It felt like hours, though it had only been minutes. Finally, the last of the ice cracked, and the girl's body was free. Jacob didn't wait to see if she was alive, he immediately wrapped her in his survival blanket, trying to keep her warm. He lifted her carefully into his arms, her small frame feeling fragile against the weight of his protective gear. She wasn't moving, and panic surged in his chest. As he made his way back to the shelter, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was only the beginning. He had just saved her, but he had no idea what other challenges lay ahead. The girl stirred in his arms, her turquoise eyes flickering open, and Jacob was met with the softest voice he had ever heard. "Thank you," she whispered, her words weak but full of gratitude. "You saved me." Jacob nodded, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "Hang in there. We need to get you out of this storm." As they reached the shelter, Jacob set her down on a cot, quickly checking her vitals. She was still alive, but just barely. She had no idea how close she had been to death. It wasn't until later that night when her sister arrived. She was a towering figure, even taller than Jacob, with the same striking turquoise skin and silvery hair, but her eyes were a sharp, glowing amber. She rushed into the shelter, her gaze locking onto Jacob. "You saved her," she demanded, her voice a mix of disbelief and gratitude. Jacob nodded. "She was trapped under the ice. I couldn't leave her there." The sister's eyes softened, and to his surprise, she dropped to one knee in front of him. "I swear a blood oath to you," she said solemnly. "You saved my sister. You have my loyalty." Jacob didn't know what to say. He had saved one life today, but in doing so, he had unknowingly earned the respect and loyalty of an entire alien race. And just like that, his life was about to change forever. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Jacob spent his time tending to the injured alien girl, whose name he had learned was Serafina, and trying to keep her stable while the storm outside raged on. Her sister, Ilara, had remained at his side, assisting whenever she could. The two sisters were an odd pair, but there was a strong bond between them, something that transcended mere blood. Ilara had made it clear from the moment she swore her blood oath that Jacob had earned her loyalty. She was fierce, protective, and her gratitude was unwavering. Jacob had expected a warm reception from Serafina's people, but he didn't expect how quickly everything would change. One evening, as the storm began to subside, Ilara approached him again. "We owe you more than just our lives," she said, her voice low but firm. Jacob turned to face her, his hands still adjusting a piece of equipment in the shelter. I didn't do it for any reward, he replied, his tone soft but sincere. Ilara took a step closer, her amber eyes steady. Perhaps not, she said, but our people believe in honoring those who save lives. We will never forget what you've done for us. Jacob felt the weight of her words. He hadn't thought about the consequences of his actions beyond just getting Serafina out of the storm. Now, though, it seemed like he had become part of something much bigger. As the days passed, Serafina's condition slowly improved. Her eyes began to clear, and her movements became less stiff as the effects of the cold wore off. Jacob had a few medical tools with him, but nothing for serious treatment. He relied heavily on his instincts and training. He couldn't help but marvel at how resilient Serafina was. Despite her injuries, she remained composed, almost regal in her demeanor, which made Jacob's admiration grow. On the fourth day, Serafina was able to sit up without assistance. Her voice was weak but clear as she spoke to Jacob. Thank you, she said simply, her turquoise eyes locking with his. You saved my life. Jacob nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I did what anyone would do. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. Not everyone would have taken the risk. As they sat in silence, Ilara entered the room with a tray of food. She set it down on the table and gave Jacob a look. We need to talk, she said quietly. Jacob's brow furrowed as he glanced at her. About what? Ilara motioned for him to follow her outside, where the wind had finally died down. Once they were away from the shelter, Ilara spoke again. The oath I swore to you, it's more than just words. She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. Our people, the Seraphim, live by a code of honor. And when you saved my sister, you didn't just save her life, you saved all of us from the shame of having one of our own perish so needlessly. Jacob didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. I don't want any more than I've already done, he said, his voice calm. I didn't do this for glory or recognition. Ilara shook her head. It's not about glory, she said, her voice hardening slightly. It's about the bond between us now. You are a part of our family. And we do not let family go unprotected. Jacob had heard of warrior cultures before, but this was something different. He had become a symbol of something greater than himself, whether he wanted to be or not. It was a strange feeling, one that left him unsettled yet proud. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered landscape, Jacob found himself lost in thought. He had come to this planet as a simple engineer, but now his life was intertwined with the fate of an alien species. And in that moment, he realized that his journey had only just begun. A new chapter was waiting for him, one where the stakes were higher than he ever imagined. Jacob's mind raced as he turned back toward the shelter, knowing that whatever came next, he would face it with a new sense of purpose alongside Serafina, Ilara, and the people he had unknowingly sworn to protect. The days grew warmer as the storm finally cleared, and Jacob's routine on the alien world began to shift. He continued his work as a rescue engineer, assisting Serafina with her rehabilitation, but there was now a new weight to his role. He wasn't just helping an injured alien, he was entwined in a deeper connection, one that extended beyond mere gratitude. Ilara's words still echoed in his mind, and he found himself grappling with a strange new reality. As the weeks passed, Jacob and the sisters spent more time together. Their shared experiences brought them closer, and Jacob learned more about their culture, their people, and their way of life. Serafina, though still recovering, began to open up. She shared stories of her home planet, of the Seraphim's strict code of honor and their long-standing traditions. It was clear to Jacob that they were a proud people, one who valued strength and resilience. Yet, despite their fierce exterior, they held loyalty and compassion in high regard. One evening, as they sat by a fire in the shelter, Ilara turned to Jacob, her amber eyes reflecting the flames. You have no idea what you've done for us, she said, her voice quiet but intense. Jacob looked at her, unsure of what she meant. I've just done what anyone would do, he replied. No, Ilara insisted. You've shown us that we're not alone. In all our years, we've never had a human take such a risk for us. The bond we share now, it's not something we take lightly. Jacob was about to respond when Seraphina spoke up, her voice still soft but steady. Ilara is right. You've earned more than just our thanks. You've earned our respect, our loyalty. The words struck Jacob deeper than he expected. He had never thought of himself as anything special. He was just a man trying to do his job, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. But now, he was part of something bigger. The weight of their trust settled on him, and for the first time, he realized just how far this bond could go. The following day, as Jacob went about his tasks, Ilara approached him again, her expression serious. There's something you need to understand about our people, she began. When we swear loyalty, it's not just a promise. It's an oath, one that binds us. We protect what is ours with our lives. Jacob nodded, unsure of where she was going. And you, Jacob, Ilara continued, her voice unwavering, are now part of what is ours. We will protect you, just as you have protected us. Jacob stood still, absorbing her words. He had always been the protector, the one who saved others. But now, it seemed like he was no longer alone in this fight. The seraphim, both Ilara and Seraphina, had made it clear that they would stand by him, no matter what came next. As the days turned into weeks, Jacob felt the weight of their bond growing stronger. He had come to this alien planet as an outsider, but now, he was family. The realization was both humbling and empowering. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving, surrounded by people who valued him, who trusted him, and who would fight for him just as fiercely as he would. Fight for them. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Jacob stood outside the shelter, looking up at the vast expanse above him. He thought about all that had happened since his arrival on this strange world. He had come here for a simple mission, but what he had found was so much more. He had found loyalty, respect, and even a family in the most unlikely of places. As the cool breeze rustled through the trees, Jacob felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. And that, more than anything, was a bond that could never be broken. Days passed, and with each one, Jacob found himself growing more accustomed to his new life with the seraphim. He spent his time assisting Seraphina in her recovery and helping Ilara with various tasks, but it was clear that the bond between them had shifted. He was no longer just a rescuer or an outsider, he was now a trusted member of their small family. Despite their gratitude, Jacob often found himself overwhelmed by the loyalty they had pledged to him. It was a loyalty that came with its own expectations, and Jacob wasn't sure he was ready for the responsibility. He had always been a solitary man, someone who kept his emotions and thoughts to himself. But now, surrounded by the sisters and their people, he was forced to confront what it meant to be part of something bigger. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the shelter, Seraphina spoke up, her voice soft but firm. "You've been more than just a savior to us, Jacob," she said, her turquoise eyes glowing in the firelight. "You've given us hope. Our people haven't known peace in a long time. You've shown us that there are still those who are willing to fight for something greater than themselves." Jacob shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to receiving praise, especially not for something he saw as simply doing his job. "I didn't do it for that," he replied, his voice low. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Seraphina smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "That's why we trust you," she said. "Because you understand that sometimes the right thing isn't the easiest thing. And it's because of that, Jacob, that we've made our decision." Jacob looked up, confused. "What decision?" Ilara stepped forward, her amber eyes intense. "We're leaving this place. We can't stay hidden forever. Our people need us, and we need to rebuild what's been lost. But we won't do it alone. We want you with us, Jacob. We want you to be part of this journey, to help lead our people into a new future." Jacob's heart raced as he processed her words. It wasn't just gratitude they were offering him, it was something far greater. They were offering him a place in their future, a future where he wasn't just a visitor but a part of something that mattered. The weight of the offer pressed down on him, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. "I'm not I'm not a leader, he finally muttered, shaking his head. I'm just a guy who's good with tools and knows how to survive. Ilara's expression softened. That's exactly why we need you. You've already proven that you're willing to put the needs of others before your own. That's the kind of leadership we need. Jacob looked at Serafina, who nodded in agreement. We don't expect you to change who you are, she said. But we need you to help guide us. We need your strength, your skills, and your heart. Jacob sat in silence, his mind racing. He had always been a man of action, not words. He had never imagined himself as a leader, especially not among a people so different from him. But as he looked at the two sisters, at the trust in their eyes and the hope in their hearts, he realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something much larger than himself. With a deep breath, Jacob made his decision. All right, he said, his voice steady. I'll help. I'll help you rebuild. But I'm doing it because I believe in what you're trying to do, not because I think I'm a leader. Ilara smiled, her amber eyes gleaming. That's all we ask. The next few days were filled with preparations. Jacob worked alongside the sisters to gather supplies and make plans for their journey. The storm had passed, but the road ahead would not be easy. They would need to travel to other Seraphim settlements, rally their people, and forge alliances. Jacob wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a purpose. As he stood on the edge of the shelter, looking out at the vast expanse of snow and ice, Jacob felt a sense of calm wash over him. He had no idea what awaited them, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, they would face it together. The journey had begun. Jacob, Serafina, and Ilara set out on foot, their first destination being the nearest Seraphim settlement. The path was treacherous, winding through the vast icy landscape with only the occasional snow-covered rock to mark their way. The winds had died down, but the cold was still biting, and the sky remained overcast, casting a dull gray hue over everything. Jacob was used to harsh conditions, but the alien world was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The Seraphim, despite their regal appearance, were not accustomed to such frigid conditions. The sisters had explained that their people came from a warmer world, and the cold of this planet was a constant challenge for them. Jacob, though, had grown accustomed to the cold over the years of working in similar environments. His gear kept him warm, but he was more concerned about the others. Serafina, though much stronger now, was still recovering from her injuries. Ilara, on the other hand, moved with the grace of someone who had spent years in these conditions. She was a natural in the snow, her movements swift and sure. As they made their way through the frozen wilderness, Jacob couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since he first arrived on this planet. He had come here as a simple engineer, just another human in a faraway galaxy. Now, he was part of something much larger, part of a cause, part of a family. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a purpose. That night, as they set up camp in the shelter of a rock formation, Jacob sat outside alone, watching the stars flicker above him. The air was cold, but the sight of the distant constellations filled him with a sense of wonder. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He had always been focused on survival, on the next mission, the next step. But now, with the Seraphim by his side, he could afford to stop and take in the view. As he sat there, deep in thought, Serafina joined him, her presence a silent comfort. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her voice soft. Jacob turned to look at her, the flickering firelight casting shadows on her face. "Just thinking," he replied. "About what?" she asked, sitting beside him. Jacob paused, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. "About how much has changed," he said finally. "How I went from being a stranger on this planet to this." He gestured toward the camp, toward the fire, and toward her. Serafina nodded, her turquoise eyes reflecting the warmth of the flames. "I know what you mean," she said. "Our people have been isolated for so long, but now, we have something to fight for. We have a future." Jacob looked at her, feeling a surge of emotion. "I'm glad I'm here with you," he said, his voice sincere. "I never thought I'd find something like this. Something worth fighting for. Serafina smiled, a small but genuine smile. You've already done more than most would have, Jacob. You saved my life. You saved our people. Jacob shook his head. I didn't do it for thanks, he said. I just did what needed to be done. Serafina reached out, placing a hand on his arm. And that's why we trust you, she said quietly. You do what needs to be done, without expecting anything in return. That's the mark of a true leader. Jacob felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He wasn't sure about being a leader, but he knew he couldn't do this alone. Not now. Not with everything that was at stake. The next morning, they continued their journey, the weight of the future pressing down on them. Jacob had no idea what awaited them, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, they would face it together. He wasn't alone anymore, and that was something he could hold on to as they moved forward into the unknown. The days grew longer as they continued their journey through the icy wasteland. Jacob, Serafina, and Ilara made slow but steady progress toward the nearest Seraphim settlement. Each step brought them closer to their goal, but the challenges were far from over. Jacob had grown accustomed to the cold, but the endless stretch of snow and ice began to wear on him. The landscape was harsh, unforgiving, and at times, it felt as if the world itself was testing their resolve. But Jacob kept moving forward, knowing that the lives of Serafina and Ilara and the future of their people depended on it. One evening, as they made camp under a rocky overhang, Ilara sat down beside Jacob, a quiet look of determination on her face. We need to talk, she said, her voice low. Jacob looked at her, raising an eyebrow. About what? Ilara glanced over at Serafina, who was resting nearby, then back at Jacob. About what happens after we reach the settlement, she said. Jacob frowned. What do you mean? The path ahead isn't easy, Ilara continued, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. Even if we reach the settlement, we will still face opposition. There are factions among our people who don't believe in the future we're fighting for. Not everyone will welcome us with open arms. Jacob thought about her words for a moment. He had heard rumors of the division among the Seraphim, of those who were resistant to change, to leaving the safety of their isolation. He had hoped that the journey would be easier than that. So what do we do? He asked. Ilara's expression softened. We move forward, she said simply. We show them what we can accomplish when we work together. We fight for what we believe in. And we trust that the rest will follow. Jacob nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was different. This was more than just a survival mission. It was a fight for a new future. And for the first time in a long while, Jacob felt a sense of purpose beyond just surviving. The next morning, they set out again, their steps steady and sure despite the uncertainty ahead. As they continued their journey, Jacob found himself reflecting on the bond he had formed with the two sisters. They were no longer just strangers he had saved, they had become his family. Their shared struggles, their shared hopes, had brought them closer together, and Jacob knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The road ahead was still long, and the challenges would only grow more difficult. But Jacob had never felt more ready. The future was uncertain, but with Serafina and Ilara by his side, he knew that they had a chance. And as they marched forward, with the cold wind whipping around them and the vast emptiness of the frozen wasteland stretching out before them, Jacob understood something. He wasn't just helping to rebuild a people, he was rebuilding a future. And that was something worth fighting for. As the days continued to pass, Jacob, Serafina, and Ilara grew closer to their goal. The settlement, once a far-off dream, was now within reach. Despite the freezing temperatures and the exhaustion that had begun to set in, Jacob could sense the growing hope between them. Each step forward, though physically taxing, was a step closer to securing a new future. The Seraphim people were resilient, but the road ahead remained uncertain. There had been whispers of internal divisions, of those who were not as convinced about leaving their isolation, and Jacob could only wonder how long it would take to convince them that they were better off united. The three travelers shared a quiet bond, one that had been forged in the harshest of circumstances. As they neared the settlement, the landscape began to change. The wide expanses of snow and ice were replaced by jagged cliffs and rocky terrain. The mountains in the distance stood tall, as if watching over the land. Jacob could feel the weight of the journey settling on his shoulders. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving, and about showing the seraphim that they had the strength to face the future together. One evening, as they set up camp, Jacob found himself standing apart from the others, gazing out at the snow-covered peaks in the distance. The fire crackled softly behind him, the warmth from the flames a welcome contrast to the cold of the night air. "You're thinking too much," Seraphina's voice interrupted his thoughts. Jacob turned to see her standing a few feet away, her turquoise eyes meeting his. "Just trying to figure out what comes next," he replied. "We're almost there, Jacob," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've done all you can. Now we just need to trust the journey." Jacob nodded, grateful for her words. He wasn't used to relying on others, but he was starting to understand the power of trust in himself. Trust in the seraphim, and trust in the path they had chosen. The following day, they finally arrived at the settlement. It was smaller than Jacob had imagined, but it was a place of life, of people, of hope. The buildings, though simple, were sturdy and well constructed, standing tall against the harsh elements of the planet. The air was different here, warmer and filled with the sounds of people going about their daily lives. As they entered the settlement, they were met with cautious but curious eyes. The seraphim in the settlement looked like the ones Jacob had come to know, their faces marked by a mixture of wariness and hope. Jacob could feel the tension in the air. Change was not always welcomed, and he knew they had a long road ahead. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "We've come to bring change," she said, her amber eyes sweeping over the faces of the gathered people. "We've come to show you that together, we can build a future, one where we no longer hide from the world. We can face it head-on, as one people." There was a long pause, a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Jacob stood at her side, watching the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, an older seraphim woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp and calculating. "And what makes you think we'll trust you?" she asked, her voice cold. Jacob took a step forward, his voice steady. "Because I believe in you," he said simply. "I believe in your strength, and I believe in your future." The woman studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Perhaps you're right," she said, her voice softer now. "Perhaps it's time for a change." The tension in the air began to ease, and Jacob could sense the shift. Change was coming, and while the path ahead was uncertain, he knew that together, they could face whatever came next. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the settlement, Jacob stood with Seraphina and Ilara, looking out at the people around them. They had taken the first step toward something new, something better. And for the first time in a long time, Jacob felt a sense of peace wash over him. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were building something worth fighting for. The days following their arrival at the settlement were filled with uncertainty and hope. Jacob, Seraphina, and Ilara were not just visitors now, they were part of a movement, a force for change in a world that had long been isolated from the rest of the galaxy. The settlement was small but vital, and its people, though cautious at first, began to see the potential in what Ilara had promised. The bond between Jacob and the seraphim was strengthening. Seraphina had continued her recovery, her once weak body growing stronger each day, and with every step she took toward healing, the weight of the journey ahead seemed a little lighter. Ilara, ever the protector, kept a watchful eye on the settlement, learning more about its inner workings and its people. Jacob found himself working side by side with her, helping to lay the foundation for the future they were building together. Yet, as the days wore on, Jacob knew that this fragile peace would not last forever. There were still those in the settlement who were hesitant about the changes Ilara and Seraphina were pushing for. A faction of seraphim elders had started to gather, voicing concerns about leaving behind the traditions that had defined their people for centuries. They feared that the seraphim would lose their identity in the process. One evening, Jacob sat with Ilara and Seraphina, a quiet fire crackling between them. The night sky was clear, the stars shining bright above their heads. "There are murmurs in the settlement," Ilara said quietly, her amber eyes scanning the horizon. "Not everyone is on board with our vision." The elders are resisting change, and some of them are starting to speak out against our plans. Jacob listened intently, his thoughts swirling. What do they want? He asked, his voice steady. They want to keep things as they are, Ilara replied, her expression hardening. They fear that by embracing the future, we'll lose who we are. They don't see that the future we're building is one where we can keep our identity while embracing progress. Serafina spoke up from her seat beside the fire, her turquoise eyes meeting Jacob's. They're afraid, she said softly. Afraid of losing control, afraid of the unknown. But we can't go back to the way things were. Our people have been hiding for too long. It's time to step into the light. Jacob nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change was never simple, and it often came with a price. But he also knew that they couldn't stay in the shadows forever. So what do we do now? He asked. Ilara looked at him, her gaze filled with determination. We show them, she said firmly. We show them that this new future doesn't mean abandoning who we are, it means building on our strengths, our values. We will prove that we can grow, and that we can be stronger together. Jacob stood, his hand resting on his rifle. Then let's get to work, he said. Over the following weeks, Jacob and the sisters worked tirelessly to engage with the elders and those resistant to change. They held meetings, explained their vision, and showed them how their new way forward could preserve the seraphim culture while embracing the advancements that would allow them to thrive. Slowly, the resistance began to wane. More and more seraphim started to see the benefits of their plans, and Jacob watched as the settlement transformed before his eyes. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about thriving, about creating a future where the seraphim could grow and prosper, not just survive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the settlement in a soft orange glow, Jacob stood on the outskirts, looking out at the people working together, side by side. The changes were happening. The future was being built, piece by piece. And for the first time in a long time, Jacob felt that the journey he had begun here was truly worth the fight. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were building something lasting, something that would carry their people into a new era. And Jacob knew that no matter what came next, he would stand with them, as part of their family, their future. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. The settlement that had once felt so uncertain now buzzed with life, as the seraphim began to embrace their new path. Jacob, Serafina, and Ilara had worked tirelessly to bring about this transformation, and it was paying off. More people joined their cause, believing that the future Ilara had promised was one worth fighting for. The elders who had initially resisted began to see the benefits of their new way forward. The seraphim were no longer just surviving, they were thriving, working together, building something that would last. Jacob found himself spending more time with Serafina, helping her adjust to the changes in the settlement and guiding her as she took on more responsibilities. Though she was still healing, her strength was undeniable. She was a leader in her own right, and Jacob could see that she was beginning to accept the weight of the role that had been placed upon her. Ilara, too, had become a symbol of the new seraphim, a fierce protector of their people and a tireless advocate for their future. Jacob had come to respect her deeply, not just for her strength but for her unwavering belief in their cause. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Jacob sat with Serafina on a hill overlooking the settlement. The firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows over the ground. Do you think we've done the right thing? Jacob asked, his voice soft but full of uncertainty. Serafina smiled, her turquoise eyes glowing in the dimming light. We've done what we had to do, she replied. Change is never easy, Jacob. But it's the only way forward. We can't stay in the past. We have to move forward, together. Jacob nodded, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. He had never imagined that he would be part of something this monumental. He had always been just a survivor, focused on the next mission, the next challenge. But now, surrounded by these people, these incredible beings, he felt like he was part of something much bigger. What happens now? Jacob asked, looking at Serafina. Now we keep building, she said simply. We keep moving forward, we keep growing, and we keep fighting for the future. There's still much to be done, but we've taken the first step. And that's more than most can say. Jacob smiled, the weight on his shoulders lighter than it had been in days. He had found a purpose here, in this strange land, with these people who had once been strangers but who now felt like family. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long time, Jacob felt ready to face it. Together, they would build something lasting, something strong, a future where the seraphim would no longer be isolated, but would stand alongside others, united. Jacob had no idea what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, he would face it with the seraphim, his new family, by his side.